Hello, beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you deepen in your connection with the angels and the divine love that they shine forth for you, and also designed to help you rest, relax, and hopefully fall asleep. I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And you can find out more about the angel sessions and soul mentoring and variety of classes that I offer at my website, illuminatingsouls.com. But for now, the invitation to you is to take a deep breath in and out and allow yourself to relax. If you're new to the concept of a sleep podcast, let me share a little bit about them with you. I have been using them for years as part of my self-care. And I love this genre so much I was guided to make my own. And so I really appreciate you being here and giving this a try. The intention of a sleep podcast is to provide you with a respite from the fast-paced waking life and help you build a bridge into a space where you can drift off. For so many of us, we grew up with the childhood routine of reading before we went to bed, and if we were lucky, we had someone who would read us a story. And if you think about the thousands of years of oral traditions of listening to stories as we drift off to sleep, this is the intention that I bring forward for you here. It may take a few tries. You may listen to this, various episodes over a period of time until it clicks for you. I know for me, I have become so used to the place that sleep podcasts hold for me that most of the time I am asleep within 20 minutes. So it may sound a bit odd to be creating content that I hope you will not be awake to hear. But if you are awake by the end of the episode, it will be a blessing to have kept you company. And you can use this at bedtime, or if you want to rest in the middle of the afternoon, or if, like me, you sometimes find yourself awake at 3 a.m., this podcast will be here for you. And I will be bringing forward the love of the angels to soothe you and to comfort you. And I promise to be good company as you let go of the waking world and allow yourself to drift off. As I'm recording this episode, I'm aware of this very gentle, relaxing energy that I have been feeling. Not every day feels like this. I certainly have not been feeling this kind of energy lately, but there is something so sweet about the energy I have been feeling in the last few hours that I was guided to plug in the microphone and share this energy with you. You know the experience you have maybe when you take a hot bath at night before drifting off to sleep and your muscles grow heavy and you're just ready for bed. That's what this energy feels like. Or when you feel deliciously noodle-like after a good massage. That's how I'm feeling right now. And so the angels and I are going to send you these vibrations. Because I believe that we live in a vibrational universe. And we have the ability to focus our attention and intention upon various frequencies of energy. And these can be amplified when we share space with another, and certainly when we call in the love of the angels. It's one of the favorite benefits that I find from working with the angels is they amplify the beneficial energies that are here for us. So I invite you to take a nice deep breath in and out and welcome in the love of your angels as they cultivate this sacred space for you. I want to share a concept with you that I find so helpful, especially when life or the world feels a bit heavy or busy. It's the concept of going off duty. So, this concept came to me many years ago, and I don't recall if someone taught it to me or if the angels brought it forward. I always like to give credit where credit is due, so I don't remember the origins of this particular teaching, but it's one that has served me well over the years, and I'm grateful to be able to share it with you. So we are multi-dimensional beings. We are more than just our waking consciousness. And we have threads of energy that are constantly out moving in the world. And these can be because we have people in our lives that we're worried about, or a situation that's happening that we're concerned for. And this can also happen without our awareness. I really became aware of this when I would be experiencing one of the difficult world situations that would come into view, and I could feel that I was growing tired, and the angels explained it was because a part of me astrally was over there helping. And as light workers, we often use our energy to help create more love and healing in this dimension. Whether you believe this is true or not, just for a moment pretend that it is. So, going off duty involves telling the angels and God that you would like to pull your energy back from the world. And usually I do this for a period of 24 to 48 hours. And I let the angels know that I'm going to go off duty and I'd like to pull my energy back. And I imagine pulling all my energy back in and ask the angels to send all of the phone calls, all of the astral calls, all of the need for assistance to other sources, because we live in a world of abundance. And so if I'm off duty or offline, there will be another entity, another being who can help. And what's so interesting is I find when I ask to go off duty, everything calms down. It's like my phone doesn't ring. I can feel a calmness around me. So especially with all that is transpiring in the world right now, and perhaps in your life, even for the next 12 hours, you can ask the angels to help you go off duty, pull your energy back in, and if there's someone that you are responsible for watching over, you can let the angels know that this individual or this situation is the exception. But other than that, you're going to pull your energy back so that you can get good rest and to not feel guilty about that. We have a tendency to go into over-responsibility even when we're sleeping. So just take a breath, my dears, and just imagine, feel, sense, pulling your energy in and giving yourself permission to go off duty, whether that's for the next 8 hours, the next few days, even the next 4 hours if you have to get involved in something soon. And just imagine then pulling your energy in with the angels creating a buffer of light for you. And what this buffer does is it helps to create a zone of sanctuary and love for you, so that the energies that come to you are here to serve and support you. For the next little while, you are not responsible to have the answers. You don't have to fix or heal anything. You simply can come into a place of receiving the love and the light that your angels and God are shining for you. So I'm going to go ahead and intentionally invite in the angels, although they are already here. So beautiful angels on high, with deep gratitude and joy, I invite you to be here with us now. I ask that you create a cocoon, a sanctuary of light, that each beloved who is hearing this message will receive a broadcast and a transmission that is calibrated specifically and uniquely for them. Please help them become aware of their innate preciousness. Assist them in connecting with divine healing at whatever dimension it will serve the highest and best good. Angels, infuse this broadcast with love and with compassion, with inspiration, and with a deep sense of well-being, so that each of us can connect with that sense of lightness of body and spirit as we drift off into a good expanse of rest and sleep. And angels, if there is anything we no longer need to carry, anything that is not ours, we ask that you lift this up into the highest realms where it can be transformed in service for the highest good. We ask to be infused with light and with love, so that when the right time comes for us to emerge from this segment of sleep and rest, we do so feeling refreshed and plugged into the goodness that is here for us. So, dear ones, just take a nice deep breath in and give yourself permission to attune to the beauty of this world. I know there's a lot of dense stuff happening in the world. There always is. But this is also a realm of great beauty and kindness. As you align yourself with these energies will begin to tend to your well-being. So you share this realm with the whales of the ocean and the birds of the sky. You share this realm with the starlit night sky and the majestic mountains that rise up and meet the clouds. You share this realm with countless people who carry kindness in their heart and serve the well-being of others. You share this realm with the animal kingdom, filled with so much wisdom and preciousness. And you share this realm with the plant and mineral kingdoms and beyond. And I don't know if you can hear it, but we're having a very windy day here. And as I said that, the wind picked up and blew. Oh, I love these windy days because they sweep out everything. And the sky gets so clear. So this is your invitation to receive the grand, sweeping, cleansing, clearing energies that are here in this moment for us all. There is a power in this world that is benevolent and is here to help you come into alignment with the beauty of your soul. So breathe in and out. And know that you are part of the beauty of this world. You are precious. And you are filled with light. And your path is being made for you. So one more breath in and out, letting your body grow more relaxed as you cozy on up, letting the angels soothe and comfort and love you. And while you do, I'm going to read to you. So tonight I'm guided to return to the book, A Little Princess. We read 2 installments many weeks ago. And this was one of my favorite books growing up. It's by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And the story is about little Sarah Crewe. She had been living in India with her young father, who was very dashing and wealthy. And during that time, it was very common to send the small children to boarding school in London. So this would be the early 1900s. And Her father made sure that Sarah had everything she could want. She had a maid. She had the best of clothing and a beautiful doll called Emily. And it wouldn't be surprising if, with all of Sarah's privileges, that she would be unkind. That sometimes happens. But little Sarah is profoundly kind and nurturing, and always willing to share of everything she has. She's, in a way, unaware of the wealth and the benefits that she is entitled to, and she doesn't quite understand why everybody doesn't get to have what she has. And later in the book, there is a very sad turn of events. And as in all good books, that happens, right? And it becomes the hero's journey, the heroine's journey to find your way through the hardship or the heartbreak. But we're not there yet. So we've already made it through the part where Sarah is settled into school and she's starting to make her friends. And she becomes aware of another little girl, a scullery maid named Becky, whose circumstances are the polar opposite of Sarah's. Where Sarah has had everything, Becky has nothing. And so this is where we're going to pick up. We're in the middle of chapter 5, which is called Becky. And also Sarah's maid is named Mariette. So who is that little girl who makes the fires, she asked Mariette that night. Mariette broke forth in a flow of description. Ah, indeed, Mademoiselle Sarah might well ask. She was a forlorn little thing who had just taken the place of the scullery maid, though as to being scullery maid, she was everything else besides. She blacked boots and grates, and carried heavy coal scuttles up and down stairs, and scrubbed floors, and cleaned windows, and was ordered about by everybody. She was 14 years old, but was so stunted in growth that she looked about 12. In truth, Mariette was sorry for her. She was so timid that if one chanced to speak to her, it appeared as if her poor frightened eyes would jump out of her head. "What is her name?" asked Sarah, who had sat by the table with her chin on her hands, as she listened absorbedly to the recital. Her name was Becky. Mariette heard everyone below stairs calling Becky do this and Becky do that every 5 minutes in the day. Sarah sat and looked into the fire, reflecting on Becky for some time after Mariette left her. She made up a story of which Becky was the ill-used heroine. She thought she looked as if she had never quite had enough to eat. Her very eyes were hungry. She hoped she could see her again, but though she caught sight of her carrying things up or downstairs on several occasions, she always seemed in such a hurry and so afraid of being seen that it was impossible to speak to her. But a few weeks later, on another foggy afternoon, when she entered her sitting room, she found herself confronting a rather pathetic picture. In her own special and pet easy chair before the bright fire, Becky, with a coal smudge on her nose and several on her apron, with her poor little cap hanging half off her head and an empty coal box on the floor, sat fast asleep, tired out, beyond even the endurance of her hard-working young body. She had been sent up to put the bedrooms in order for the evening. There were a great many of them, and she had been running about all day. Sarah's rooms she had saved until the last. They were not like the other rooms, which were plain and bare. Ordinary pupils were expected to be satisfied with mere necessities. Sarah's comfortable sitting room seemed a bower of luxury to the scullery maid, though it was in fact merely a nice, bright little room. But there were pictures and books in it and curious things from India. There was a sofa and the low, soft chair. Emily sat in a chair of her own, with the air of presiding goddess, and there was always a glowing fire and a polished grate. Becky saved it until the end of her afternoon's work because it rested her to go into it, and she always hoped to snatch a few minutes to sit down in the soft chair and look about her, and think about the wonderful good fortune of the child who owned such surroundings, and who went out on the cold days in beautiful hats and coats one tried to catch a glimpse of through the area railing. On this afternoon, when she had sat down, the sensation of relief to her short, aching legs had been so wonderful and delightful that it had seemed to soothe her whole body, and the glow of warmth and comfort from the fire had crept over her like a spell, until, as she looked at the red coals, a tired, slow smile stole over her smudged face. Her head nodded forward without her being aware of it. Her eyes drooped, and she fell fast asleep. She had really been only about 10 minutes in the room when Sarah entered, but she was in as deep a sleep as if she had been like the Sleeping Beauty, slumbering for 100 years. But she did not look, poor Becky, like Sleeping Beauty at all. She looked only like an ugly, stunted, worn-out little scullery drudge. Sarah seemed as much unlike her as if she were a creature from another world. On this particular afternoon she had been taking her dancing lessons, and the afternoon on which the dancing master appeared was a rather grand occasion at the seminary, though it occurred every week. The pupils were attired in their prettiest frocks, and as Sarah danced particularly well, she was very much brought forward, and Mariette was requested to make her as diaphanous and fine as possible. Today a frock the color of a rose had been put on her, and Mariette had brought some real buds and made her a wreath to wear on her black locks. She had been learning a new delightful dance, in which she had been skimming and flying around the room like a large rose-colored butterfly, and the enjoyment and exercise had brought a brilliant, happy glow into her face. When she entered the room, she floated in with a few of the butterfly steps, and there sat Becky, nodding her cap sideways off her head. "Oh," cried Sarah softly when she saw her, "that poor thing." It did not occur to her to feel cross at finding her pet chair occupied by the small, dingy figure. To tell the truth, she was quite glad to find it there. When the ill-used heroine of her story wakened, she could talk to her. She crept toward her quietly and stood looking at her. Becky gave a little snore. "I wish she'd waken herself," Sarah said. "I don't like to waken her, but Miss Minchin would be cross if she found out. I'll just wait a few minutes." She took a seat on the edge of the table and sat swinging her slim, rose-colored legs and wondering what it would be best to do. Miss Amelia might come in at any moment, and if she did, Becky would sure to be scolded. "But she is so tired," she thought. "She is so tired." A piece of flaming coal ended her perplexity for her at that very moment. It broke off from a large lump and fell to the fender. Becky started and opened her eyes with a frightening gasp. She did not know she had fallen asleep. She had only sat down for one moment and felt the beautiful glow, and here she found herself staring in wild alarm at the wonderful pupil who sat quite near her, like a rose-colored fairy with interested eyes. She sprang up and clutched at her cap. She felt it dangling over her ear and tried wildly to put it straight. Oh, she had gotten herself into trouble now with a vengeance. To have fallen asleep on such a young lady's chair, she would be turned out of doors without wages. She made a sound like a big breathless sob. Oh, miss, she stuttered. I arst your pardon, miss. Oh, I do, miss. Sarah jumped down and came quite close to her. Don't be frightened, she said, quite as if she had been speaking to a little girl like herself. It doesn't matter the least bit. I didn't go to do it, miss, protested Becky. It was the warm fire and me being so tired. It wasn't impertinence. Sarah broke into a friendly little laugh and put her hand on her shoulder. You are tired, she said. You could not help it. You are not really awake yet. How poor Becky stared at her. In fact, she had never heard such a nice, friendly sound in anyone's voice before. She was used to being ordered about and scolded and having her ears boxed, and this one, in her rose-colored dancing afternoon splendor, was looking at her as if she were not a culprit at all, as if she had a right to be tired and even to fall asleep. The soft of the touch slim little paw on her shoulder was the most amazing thing she had ever known. Aren't you angry, miss? She gasped. Aren't you going to tell the missus? No, cried out Sarah, of course I'm not. The woeful fright in the coal-smutted face made her suddenly so sorry that she could scarcely bear it. One of her queer thoughts rushed into her mind, and she put her hand against Becky's cheek. Why, she said, we are just the same. I am only a little girl like you. It's just an accident that I'm not you and you are not me. Becky did not understand in the least. Her mind could not grasp such amazing thoughts, and an accident meant to her a calamity in which someone was run over or fell off a ladder and was carried to the hospital. An accident, miss? She fluttered respectfully. Is it? Yes, Sarah answered, and she looked at her dreamily for a moment. But the next she spoke in a different tone. She realized that Becky did not know what she meant. Have you done your work? She asked. Dare you stay here a few minutes? Becky lost her breath again. Here, miss? Me? Sarah ran to the door, opened it, and looked out and listened. No one is anywhere about, she explained. If your bedrooms are finished, perhaps you might stay a tiny while, I thought. Perhaps you'd like a piece of cake. The next 10 minutes seemed to Becky like a sort of delirium. Sarah opened a cupboard and gave her a thick slice of cake. She seemed to rejoice when it was devoured in hungry bites. She talked and asked questions and laughed until Becky's fears actually began to calm themselves, and she once or twice gathered boldness enough to ask a question or so herself, daring as she felt it to be. Is that, she ventured, looking longingly at the rose-colored frock, and she asked it almost in a whisper, is that there your best? It's one of my dancing frocks, answered Sarah. I like it, don't you? For a few seconds, Becky was almost speechless with admiration. Then she said in an awed voice, Once I see a princess. I was standing in the street with the crowd outside, Covent Gardens, watching the swells go into the opera, and there was one everyone stared at most. They says to each other, that's the princess. She was a grown-up young lady, but she was pink all over, gowned and cloak and flowers and all. I called her to mind the minute I see you sitting there on the table, miss. You looked like her. I've often thought, said Sarah in her reflecting voice, that I should like to be a princess. I wonder what it feels like. I believe I will begin pretending I am one. Becky stared at her admiringly, and as before did not understand her in the least. She watched her with a sort of adoration. Very soon, Sarah left her reflections and turned to her with a new question. "Becky," she said, "weren't you listening to that story?" "Yes, miss," confessed Becky, a little alarmed again. "I know I hadn't ought to, but it was that beautiful and I couldn't help it." "I liked that you listened to it," said Sarah. "If you tell stories, you like nothing so much as to tell them to people who want to listen. I don't know why it is. Would you like to hear the rest?" Becky lost her breath again. "Me hear it," she cried, "like as if I were a pupil, miss, all about the prince, and the little mer babies swimming about laughing with stars in their hair?" Sarah nodded. "You haven't time to hear it now, I'm afraid," she said, "but if you will tell me just what time you come to do my rooms, I will try to be here and tell you a bit of it every day until it's finished. It's a lovely long one, and I'm always putting new bits to it." "Then," breathed Becky devoutly, "I wouldn't mind how heavy the coal boxes were or what the cook had done to me, if I might have that to think of." "You may," said Sarah. "I'll tell it all to you." When Becky went downstairs, she was not the same Becky who had staggered up, loaded down by the weight of the coal scuttle. She had an extra piece of cake in her pocket, and she had been fed and warmed, but not only by cake and fire. Something else had warmed and fed her, and the something else was Sarah. When she was gone, Sarah sat on her favorite perch on the end of her table. Her feet were on a chair, her elbows on her knees, and her chin in her hands. "If I was a princess, a real princess," she murmured, "I could scatter largesse to the populace. But even if I'm only a pretend princess, I can invent little things to do for people, things like this." She was just as happy as if it were a largesse. "I'll pretend that to do things people like is like scattering a largesse. I have scattered largesse." Chapter 6, The Diamond Mines. Not very long after this very exciting thing happened, not only Sarah, but the entire school found it exciting and made it the chief subject of conversation for weeks after it occurred. In one of his letters, Captain Crewe told a most interesting story. A friend who had been at school with him when he was a boy had unexpectedly come to him to see him in India. He was the owner of a large tract of land upon which diamonds had been found, and he was engaged in developing the mines. If all went as confidently as expected, he would become possessed of such wealth as it made one dizzy to think of, and because he was fond of the friend of his school days, he had given him an opportunity to share in this enormous fortune by becoming a partner in his scheme. This, at least, was what Sarah gathered from his letters. It is true that any other business scheme, however magnificent, would have had but a small attraction for her or the schoolroom, but diamond mines sounded so like the Arabian Nights that no one could be indifferent. Sarah thought them enchanting, and painted pictures for Ermengarde and Lottie of labyrinth passages in the bowels of the earth, where sparkling stones studded the walls and roofs and ceilings, and strange men dug them out with heavy picks. Ermengarde delighted in the story, and Lottie insisted on it being retold to her every evening. Lavinia was very spiteful about it, and told Jessie that she didn't believe such things as diamond mines existed. "My mamma has a diamond ring which cost 40 pounds, she said, and it is not a big one either. If there were mines full of diamonds, people would be so rich it would be ridiculous." "Perhaps Sarah will be so rich that she will be ridiculous," giggled Jessie. "She's ridiculous without being rich," Lavinia sniffed. "I believe you hate her," said Jessie. "No, I don't," snapped Lavinia, "but I don't believe in mines full of diamonds." "Well, people have to get them from somewhere," said Jessie. Lavinia, with a new giggle, "What do you think Gertrude says?" "I don't know, I'm sure, and I don't care. It's something more about the everlasting Sarah. Well, it is. One of her pretends is that she is a princess. She plays it all the time, even in school. She says it makes her learn her lessons better. She wants Ermengarde to be one too, but Ermengarde says she's too fat. She is too fat, said Lavinia, and Sarah is too thin. Naturally, Jessie giggled again. She says it has nothing to do with what you look like or what you have. It only is to do with what you think of and what you do. I suppose she thinks she could be a princess if she was a beggar, said Lavinia. Let us begin to call her your Royal Highness. Lessons for the day were over, and they were sitting before the schoolroom fire enjoying the time they liked best. It was the time when Miss Minchin and Miss Amelia were taking their tea in the sitting room, sacred to themselves. At this hour a great deal of talking was done, and a great many secrets changed hands, particularly if the younger pupils behaved themselves well and did not squabble or run about noisily, which it must be confessed they usually did. When they made an uproar, the older girls usually interfered with scolding and shakes. They were expected to keep order, and there was danger that if they did not, Miss Minchin or Miss Amelia would appear and put an end to the festivities. Even as Lavinia spoke, the door opened and Sarah entered with Lottie, whose habit was to trot everywhere after her like a little dog. There she is with that horrid child, exclaimed Lavinia in a whisper. If she's so fond of her, why doesn't she keep her in her own room? She will begin howling about something in 5 minutes. It happened that Lottie had been seized with a sudden desire to play in the schoolroom, and had begged her adopted parent to come with her. She joined a group of little ones who were playing in a corner. Sarah curled herself up in the window seat, opened a book, and began to read. It was a book about the French Revolution, and she was soon lost in a harrowing picture of the prisoners of the Bastille, men who had spent so many years in dungeons that when they were dragged out by those who rescued them, their long gray hair and beards almost hid their faces, and they had forgotten that an outside world existed at all, and were like beings in a dream. She was so far away from the schoolroom that it was not agreeable to be dragged back suddenly by a howl from Lottie. Never did she find anything so difficult as to keep herself from losing her temper when she was suddenly disturbed while absorbed in a book. People who are fond of books know the feeling of irritation which sweeps over them at such a moment. The temptation to be unreasonable and snappish is one not easy to manage. It makes me feel as if someone had hit me, Sarah had told Ermengarde once in confidence, and as if I want to hit back. I have to remember things quickly to keep from saying something ill-tempered. She had to remember things quickly when she laid her book on the window seat and jumped down from her comfortable corner. Lottie had been sliding across the schoolroom floor, and having first irritated Lavinia and Jessie by making a noise, had ended by falling down and hurting her fat knee. She was screaming and dancing up and down in the midst of a group of friends and enemies who were alternately coaxing and scolding her. "Stop this minute, you crybaby, stop this minute," Lavinia commanded. "I'm not a crybaby, I'm not," wailed Lottie. "Sarah, Sarah." "If she doesn't stop, Miss Minchin will hear her," cried Jessie. "Lottie, darling, I'll give you a penny." "I don't want your penny," sobbed Lottie, and she looked down at the fat knee and, seeing a drop of blood in it, burst forth again. Sarah flew across the room, and kneeling down, she put her arms around her. "Now, Lottie," she said, "now, Lottie, you promised Sarah." "She said I was a crybaby," wept Lottie. Sarah patted her, but spoke in the steady voice Lottie knew. "But if you cry, you will be one, Lottie, pet. You promised." Lottie remembered that she had promised, but she preferred to lift up her voice. I haven't any mama, she proclaimed. I haven't a bit of mama. Yes, you have, said Sarah cheerfully. Have you forgotten? Don't you know that Sarah is your mama? Don't you want Sarah for your mama? Lottie cuddled up to be with her in a consoled sniff. Come and sit in the window seat with me, Sarah went on, and I'll whisper a story to you. Will you? Whimpered Lottie. Will you tell me about the diamond mines? The diamond mines, broke out Lavinia. Nasty little spoiled thing. I should like to slap her. Sarah got up quick on her feet. It must be remembered that she had been very deeply absorbed in the book about the Bastille, and she had had to recall several things rapidly when she realized that she must go and take care of her adopted child. She was not an angel, and she was not fond of Lavinia. Well, she said with some fire, I should like to slap you, but I don't want to slap you, restraining herself. At least I both want to slap you, and I should like to slap you, but I won't slap you. We are not little gutter children. We are both old enough to know better. Here was Lavinia's opportunity. Ah, yes, your Royal Highness, she said. We are princesses, I believe. At least one of us is. The school ought to be very fashionable now Miss Minchin has a princess for a pupil. Sarah started toward her. She looked as if she were going to box her ears. Perhaps she was. Her trick of pretending things was the joy of her life. She never spoke of it to girls she was not fond of. Her new pretend about being a princess was very near to her heart, and she was shy and sensitive about it. She had meant it to be rather a secret, and here was Lavinia deriding it before nearly all the school. She felt the blood rush up into her face and tingle in her ears. She only just saved herself. If you were a princess, you did not fly into rages. Her hand dropped, and she stood quite still a moment. When she spoke, it was in a quiet, steady voice. She held her head up, and everybody listened to her. It's true, she said. Sometimes I do pretend I am a princess. I pretend I am a princess so that I can try and behave like one. Lavinia could not think of exactly the right thing to say. Several times she had found that she could not think of a satisfactory reply when she was dealing with Sarah. The reason for this was that somehow the rest always seemed to be vaguely in sympathy with her opponent. She saw now that they were pricking up their ears interestedly. The truth was they liked princesses, and they all hoped they might hear something more definite about this one and drew nearer Sarah accordingly. Lavinia could only invent one remark, and it fell rather flat. Dear me, she said, I hope when you ascend the throne you won't forget us. I won't, said Sarah, and she did not utter another word but stood quite still and stared at her steadily as she saw her take Jessie's arm and turned away. After this, the girls who were jealous of her used to speak of her as Princess Sarah whenever they wished to be particularly disdainful, and those who were fond of her gave her the name among themselves as a term of affection. No one called her Princess instead of Sarah, but her adorers were much pleased with the picturesqueness and grandeur of the title. And Miss Minchin, hearing of it, mentioned it more than once to visiting parents, feeling that it rather suggested a sort of royal boarding school. To Becky it seemed the most appropriate thing in the world. The acquaintance begun on the foggy afternoon, when she had jumped up terrified from her sleep in the comfortable chair, had ripened and grown, though it must be confessed that Miss Minchin and Miss Amelia knew very little about it. They were aware that Sarah was kind to the scullery maid, but they knew nothing of the certain delightful moments snatched perilously when the upstairs rooms being set in order with lightning rapidity, Sarah's sitting room was reached, and the heavy coal box sat down with a sigh of joy. At such times stories were told by installments. Things of a satisfying nature were either produced and eaten or hastily tucked into pockets to be disposed of at night when Becky went upstairs to her attic bed. "But I have to eat them carefully, miss," she said once, "because if I leave crumbs, the rats come out to get them." "Rats!" exclaimed Sarah in horror. "Are there rats here?" "Lots of 'em, miss," Becky answered in quite a matter-of-fact manner. "There are mostly rats and mice in attics. You get used to the noise they make scuttling about. I've gotten so I don't mind them as long as they don't run over my pillow." "Ah," said Sarah. "You get used to anything after a bit," said Becky. "You have to, miss. If you're born a scullery maid, I'd rather have rats than cockroaches." "So would I," said Sarah. "I suppose you might make friends with a rat in time, but I don't believe I should like to make friends with a cockroach." Sometimes Becky did not dare to spend more than a few minutes in the bright, warm room, and when this was the case, perhaps only a few words could be exchanged, and then a small purchase slipped into the old-fashioned pocket Becky carried under her dress skirt, tied around her waist with a band of tape. The search for and discovery of satisfying things to eat which could be packed in a small compass added a new interest to Sarah's existence. When she drove or walked out, she used to look into the shop windows eagerly. The first time it occurred to her to bring home 2 or 3 little meat pies, she felt that she had hit upon a discovery. And when she exhibited them, Becky's eyes sparkled. "Oh, miss," she murmured, "they will be nice and filling. It's a fillingness that's best. Sponge cake's a heavenly thing, but it melts away like, if you understand, miss. These'll just stay in your stomach." "Well," hesitated Sarah, "I don't think it would be good if they stayed always, but I do believe they will be satisfying." They were satisfying, and so were beef sandwiches brought at a cook shop, and so were rolls and bologna sausage. In time, Becky began to lose her hungry, tired feeling, and the coal box did not seem so unbearably heavy. However, heavy as it was, and whatsoever the temper of the cook, and the hardness of the work heaped upon her shoulders, she always had the chance of the afternoon to look forward to, the chance that Miss Sarah would be able to be in her sitting room. In fact, the mere seeing of Miss Sarah would have been enough without meat pies. If there was time only for a few words, they were always friendly, merry words that put heart into one, and if there was a time for more, then there was an installment of the story to be told or some other thing one remembered afterward, and sometimes lay awake in one's bed in the attic to think over. Sarah, who was only doing what she unconsciously liked better than anything else, nature having made her a giver, had not the least idea what she meant to poor Becky and how wonderful a benefactor she seemed. If nature has made you for a giver, your hands are borne open, and so is your heart. And though there may be times when your hands are empty, your heart is always full, and you can give things out of that, warm things, kind things, sweet things, help and comfort and laughter, and sometimes gay, kind laughter is the best help of all. Becky had scarcely known what laughter was through her poor little heart-driven life. Sarah made her laugh and laughed with her, and though neither of them quite knew it, the laughter was as filling as the meat pies. A few weeks before Sarah's 11th birthday, a letter came to her from her father, which did not seem to be written in such boyish high spirits as usual. He was not very well, and was evidently overweighed by the business connected with the diamond mines. "You see, little Sarah," he wrote, "your daddy is not a businessman at all, and figures and documents bother him. He does not really understand them, and all this seems so enormous. Perhaps if I was not feverish, I should not be awake tossing about one half of the night and spend the other half in troublesome dreams. If my little missus were here, I dare say she would give me some solemn good advice. You would, wouldn't you, little missus?" One of his many jokes had been to call her his little missus because she had such an old-fashioned air. He had made wonderful preparations for her birthday. Among other things, a new doll had been ordered in Paris, and her wardrobe was to be, indeed, a marvel of splendid perfection. When she had replied to the letter asking if the doll would be an acceptable present, Sarah had been very quaint. "I am getting very old," she wrote. "You see, I shall never live to have another doll given to me. This will be my last doll. There is something solemn about it. If I could write poetry, I'm sure a poem about a last doll would be very nice. But I cannot write poetry. I have tried." And it made me laugh. It did not sound like Watts or Coleridge or Shakespeare at all. No one could ever take Emily's place, but I should respect the last doll very much, and I am sure the school would love it. They all like dolls, though some of the big ones, the almost 15 ones, pretend that they are too grown up. Captain Crewe had a splitting headache when he read this letter in his bungalow in India. The table before him was heaped with papers and letters which were alarming him and filling him with anxious dread. But he laughed as he had not laughed for weeks. "Oh," he said, "she's better fun every year she lives. God, grant this business may right itself and leave me free to run home and see her. What I wouldn't give to have her little arms around my neck this minute. What I wouldn't give." And with that, my beautiful friends, I'm going to bid you good night. The book's story is about to turn, and we'll move through it together. But for now, I leave you with the beautiful, generous, compassionate spirit of Sarah. It's one of the things I fell in love with in this book, and that she was a girl who daydreamed and told stories. It reminded me of how I was an active daydreamer as a child too, and perhaps you were as well. So, you rest. You have a good night's sleep. You let the angels watch over you and know that you are precious and you are loved. And I am so grateful to have spent this time with you. Blessings to you, beloved. I am grateful for you.